Reducing the population by 99% and going by the percentages earlier, Nevada has roughly 38,800 people left alive. Utah has roughly 41,600 people left alive. Arizona has roughly 85,630 people left alive. California has roughly 472,000 people left alive. Oregon has roughly 50,000 people left alive. Idaho has roughly 23,600 people left alive. So the rough population of theoretical immigrants into Nevada could be around 736,000. However, it is more likely to be much lower, as people will travel to parts of the Colorado River Basin which are closest to them. As we can see, the Colorado River that travels through Nevada is in the absolute corner of it, whereas Utah and Arizona have much longer stretches of the river. A few side notes before we move on. It is possible that Glen Canyon Dam may either be holding back irradiated water, or simply no longer exists. But there is no way to know at this juncture. It is also possible there is a level of radiation too low for the Pip-Boy Geiger counter to detect, the result of incredible amounts of dilution. Lastly, there is no guarantee that the Colorado River even exists as we understand it. Time, natural disasters, and the obvious mass nuclear devastation may have completely altered the topography of the river basin. However, as the water levels seem fine in Nevada, and the water seems neither polluted nor irradiated, the reason I bring this up is that it is possible the river has in areas been redirected to states which the Colorado River once did not reach. However, since we can't know the level of devastation, we will continue to use maps we have for the America we knew, especially as any changes in the river basin are unlikely to be too extreme. Speaking of, there is a limit to just how radiation-free the river basin is. If one travels far enough south on the Colorado River, beyond what was supposed to eventually become a Legion beachhead, then a little further, beyond the bounds of the Nevada state, one shall find that the water is as irradiated as everywhere else in America. Traveling even further south gets you to a place called Dry Wells, which, pre-war, was most likely to be Castle Rock Bay, or perhaps Job's Landing, as these are on the east bank, where Dry Wells reportedly is, and are the closest residential areas to Arizona. The water here is also irradiated, however. This is more than likely due to the very recent crater a certain courier is responsible for. Believe it or not, this is very important to know, as it shows us there is a point the water stops being pure enough to drink. This radioactive line in the river effectively hems in the survivor population, forcing resettlement to parts of the river without radiation. Furthermore, as we know the water south of Cottonwood Cove is irradiated, we can safely assume that the Gila River, Salt River, Santa Cruz River, and San Pedro River must also be irradiated. However, few, if any, would relocate to Nevada. The populations of southern Arizona would simply relocate to upper Arizona, where the Little Colorado River and Grand Canyon both exist, as the distance is much shorter. Therefore, most if not all of Wyoming, Utah, and Arizona's population will stay in state, as it is highly feasible to assume that the Colorado River is clean all the way to its sources, including multiple rivers and snowmelt from the Rocky Mountains. There will still be a mass exodus in these states, but it will be a shift towards their section of the Colorado River Basin. Every other state, however, will see a mass exodus of its survivor population, and as rapidly as humanly possible. The people of Idaho would certainly prefer to walk to Wyoming or Utah, as it is much closer. If the Interstate 84 is still intact, it provides a direct line between Oregon and Utah, despite Nevada being closer. We can't know the exact numbers, but to save us both time, we'll split Oregon's survivor population down the middle. Half to Utah, half to Nevada. All of California would travel to Nevada, despite having the smallest section of the Colorado River. It is also much closer. Furthermore, the Colorado River south of Nevada is irradiated, making it too dangerous to reach Arizona. Therefore, even Southern Californians will be inclined to resettle around Lake Mead. As a result, the new survivors' population would be roughly 555,800 people overwhelmingly from California, though there will definitely be stubborn leftovers. This would happen over the course of a year. As time goes on, far more people would risk the trek west for the Colorado Basin. However, most, if not all, would not join the people of Nevada state. Instead, they would settle in Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and a few in the western edge of New Mexico. It is possible Hoover Dam may attract more migrants than expected. The dam's fortified position and ability to generate electricity makes it an invaluable location. A state which once had the capacity for 3,720,000 now being reduced to 555,800 people may seem manageable at first glance. However, that 3.7 million was spread around each of the four corners of the state. Now, the survivors are huddled around 140 miles, or 225 kilometers of the Colorado River, including Lake Mead, with roughly shaped homes made from whatever they have on hand that hasn't been irradiated. But this is far from the end of things. To paraphrase a certain infamous quote, if people build it, people will come. And the more people who come, the more people will build. As numbers grow, so too does squalor. Forget the cute novel idea of raider gangs. The Mojave will be ruled over by factions numbering in the thousands, tied to state identity, personal politics, old gang ties, pre-war corporate affiliation, ex-government employees, and the inevitable racial lines. The rest of America hasn't even turned up yet. As always, things are going to get worse. As previously highlighted, there are no other known clear water sources in America. Even prepper bunkers will only last so long. Their purifiers need to be constantly repaired, cleaned out, and replaced. Only a ghoul could last 200 years in a glorified box. It is not far-fetched to imagine Americans traveling 2,500 miles for the only known body of radiation-free water in America. People have traveled further for less. Obviously, a straight line is impossible. The journey would most likely be by a pre-war road. Fortunately, most won't even need to travel half that distance. There will be inevitable hurdles between all these disparate groups forced into a small space. However, it is more than possible that the values of pre-war America are still largely intact. And despite everything, there may be an attempt at an accord between the many groups. But as space runs out, any remaining goodwill left over from the old order will disintegrate as quickly as space at the river's edge becomes exhausted. People fight for space and access to the water. The pot boils over. The sand runs red. Small skirmishes evolve into endless blood feuds for whatever scrap of beach can be claimed. It is entirely possible that remnants of the army will be involved as well, and will attempt to establish the law and order once believed in before the bombs fell. It is beyond unlikely that they will succeed, as the survivors reject their old world authority. It is more likely they will dissolve into whichever group their families belong to. Factions will begin to form to preserve the survival of their members, even if it must come at the expense of other groups. Indeed, some factions would begin to thrive off making other groups suffer for their survival, and eventually, their pleasure. These larger groups will consume individuals and small families, and over time, their very concept of who they are will change with the people they subsume. Even the more ruthless groups, refusing to alter their way to the new population, will inevitably crack and come apart unless a true and bloody tyrant rises to power. Before then, those who control their part of the beach will charge smaller, less organized groups for access to the water, with the struggle over pricing as fraught as the endless skirmishes. But what about the rest of America? The entire West Coast would know about the river basin within months. It would take years for word of mouth to spread to the East Coast. There are certainly a few ham radios still lying around, so maybe word travels sooner. But 200 years is a very long time for word not to reach the capital wasteland. The ruins of Boston, or elsewhere on the East Coast, a river basin filled with radiation-free water, the scale of migration would be historic. As every city in America is emptied of all but its hermits, nearly 4 million people would inevitably begin to crowd into the Colorado River Basin, America's very own Euphrates, for this new Bronze Age of humanity. The only way order could be stabilized is if a new and brutally violent ideology, or religion, quashed these tensions and promoted a singular moral structure to order human lives by. Caesar is living proof of this. Of all the men of the Fallout universe, men such as he would thrive. However, Edward Salo won't be born for another 149 years. Or at least, that's how it should have been. Now, for the butterfly effect.